Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, today, if you heard of something like the Diablo 2 Singer Barbarian, this is the Path of Exile equivalent. Now, this isn't a build that I've made from scratch, it's just something that I found a POB for on PoE Ninja, and I've extrapolated and made it work the way that I play, which is super tanky. And in fact, we're at about 288,000 effective hit pool. Now, the best way to play this, and there is a Scion variant out there as well. If you want to check that out, you can. Just search for it on PoE Ninja. But the best way to play this currently is Forbidden Shaco. Now, this build is not cheap. It's like easily 120 div build. Some of the items you need to get it to work are a bit... yeah, so a level 34 Forbidden Shaco, won't tell you here, is somewhere in the vicinity of like 19 to 25 div, just for the helm. It's not the most expensive item in the entire game, but it's definitely not cheap, so I'm not advocating that this is a cheap build by any measure. Other things where it runs Defiance of Destiny, you know, these aren't like too expensive depending on the role you get. Sorry, correction, about 8 to 11 div, and they've went back up in price for some weird reason. And then the other thing too, like the defense layering on this build utilizes 4th Vaal setup, so we're going to be using Zabiqua or Corrupted Flesh. Pretty sure, Divine Flesh, sorry. And then basically that's going to mean we have to find a way to overcap Chaos Res, which was a little challenging and still isn't exactly perfect, but it works once Progenesis is up, and then that reduces your elemental damage taken by like 50%, and that's really effective. That works really well in this build. By the way, Taste of Hate isn't the best flask in socket, but it works pretty well, so yeah. So basically how this works is with the introduction of the new automation gems this league, in particular Call to Arms, we basically set this up with Enduring Cry. So we perpetually have Enduring Cry, so we have a huge amount of regeneration every 1.16 seconds this recharges. So 1.61 seconds, sorry, not 1.16. A little dyslexic there. And then basically we just use Call to Arms, auto trigger Enduring Cry constantly, with level 34 Corrupting Cry, Awaken Brutality, and Swift Affliction to get it cranking. And the other thing we do is we look for any cooldown reduction we can for War Cries. In my case, I use a Flow of Untethered. I get 20% increased cooldown reduction. This belt's really good, and you get Slipstream, which is what makes my build run really quickly through maps. I also use all the tattoos of Tukahama Warcaller, so you get 8% for Warcry cooldown recovery rate for each one of these, and we've also got all the nodes in here for Warcries as well as like Warning Call, Lead by Example, you name it, it's got it. Now my setup of this build also uses the Adorned, sorry, where are we? Up here, the Adorned. I've only got a 95% roll, and then I stack 4 Adorn jewels or magic corrupted jewels, and then that gets me, you know, what's that? Instead of 15% global fizz, 29.5%, something like that, and then it doubles my fizz dot. So it's a really easy way to scale the build if you want to progress it further. Now, my build in particular focuses more so on defense, and it gets up to 10 stacks of Corrupted Blood really easily. Like in the B-roll, you would have seen it's doing T17 Fortress maps pretty easily. It can do the bosses, takes a little longer to kill. Map bosses really aren't a big issue. I've farmed Uber Elder with it. I've done every boss except I was unable to take out Uber Atsiri. I just had issues with the Reflect. As in, it wasn't the Reflect that was doing damage, it's just I didn't have enough defense to face tank it, because this does rely on face tanking things. But the biggest advantage of this build, like I do use Reap as a secondary skill on my 6-link setup here. So I've got Vaal Reap, which applies 9 blood stacks because we use Reap to basically take bosses down really quickly. Basically, it's like 2 buttons. I hope that's okay. Like 1 button, if you don't even want to do that, you could just run around in circles. So it's super tanky, really easy on the wrists. And that's the reason why I made this build. Because I was getting through the league, trying to do challenges and stuff like that. I was sort of like, my hands are hurting, I don't want to play Bone Shatter all day long because it's a pain, and as much as I like my totem build, I have to drop the totems constantly, and that was a comment I saw. So I was like, oh, let's just create a fully automated build because I'm really lazy. So on top of that, I also run a phase run setup with my Molten Shell that's on the automation setup with Life Tap. There is no mana cost in this build, so we don't need to worry about mana balancing. We just spend life, and we regenerate so much life that it doesn't even matter. And then anything that costs mana is life, as in, sorry, is mitigated by the Defiance of Destiny, because we have 31% of our missing unreserved life before being hit by an enemy is gained back. And then, you know, we have some stats elsewhere in the build that crank up our life regeneration and whatnot. Now, my wand isn't perfect. My shield isn't corrupted with an implicit. My boots could be way better. I also have cooldown reduction on my boots. We'll talk about gearing soon. And my gloves, the implicit on the gloves could be significantly better. My helm could have an implicit on that if I so chose to gamble and corrupt that in. And definitely my eagle coil ring is not very good compared to what it could be. And I don't have any dot on my ring, so that can be improved. Other things in the build that stick out, like we use a double 8-socket cluster, or 8-socket cluster with Master of the Fundamentals and Battle Hard and Furious Assault. These are like 4 or 5 divs, something like that. So there's a little bit of investment in there. And outside of that, we have got a Watcher's Eye here, which is really cheap. I got a bad rolled Pride Watcher's Eye, so you can get way better than that. Just because damage is really good on this build. So there's a lot of room to really move in this build and improve it further. This is just where I got it to, and I'm pretty happy with the build. Like, it's doing everything I want it to. If you check the PoB, if you check PoE Ninja right now, this is also the deepest Corrupting Blood Warcry build in Delve. It's like 820 something. I thought that'd just be really funny. Does it do it well? Not really, but it's just fun being able to do it and go that far in Delve with it and just like use it to almost like find Vaal architects and then just farm curiosity. So that's what I'm currently doing with it. But outside of that, I'm just using it to bash maps. And it's one of those builds that you can just set Netflix up in the background and watch your TV while you mindlessly click buttons and just farm, and it's just genuinely enjoyable and something really different. Like, it's not like playing the same old meta. It's not boring, it's just interesting. But yeah, anyway, let's talk about the PoB next and some of the details around the build. Okay, so I just realized I talked through this and forgot to hit the record button. So anyway, all right. So we kill all bandits. Sol Inaris is our major god. Tukahama is our minor god. Time spent stationary, you could set it to 5, but leave it on 0, doesn't really matter. We do use endurance charges. We have that. Life tap isn't, it's there, but it's not really that prevalent because everything spends mana with corrupting cry and everything else. Nothing else is ticked. Nearby enemies are set to 10. 450 life is the cast cost to roundabouts for corrupting cry with enduring cry attached to that. Have we been hit by enemies recently? Yes. Have we used a Warcry? Yes. Recently, yes. About 1.61 seconds. Every 1.61 seconds. Have we used a Warcry in the past 8 seconds? Well, 1.61 goes into that around about 4 point something times. So, yes. And number of seconds you've been affected by Warcry buff. We're basically always affected by Warcry buffs. Now, we've got 10 stacks of Corrupted Blood. It stacks up pretty quickly. If you don't like that, change it. Other than that, I'm not going to tell you how to live. This is how I've got it set. Harbinger of Time is the slipstream active. Generally, it's always active. Pride effect, I've got it set to maximum, but if you want to be meticulous and pedantic and try and figure out how that works, you can just set it to initial and just go builders crap build, see you later. But I've got it set to maximum because, let's be real, that's what it's going to be when you're taking on bosses. Now, anyway, no other settings are changed here. I've got Taunt and Debilitate. Taunt obviously running a Warcry setup, and Debilitate is coming from the Mastery here on the tree, which debilitates enemies for 1 second once they're affected by your Warcries. Is the enemy boss Guardian Pinnacle? Yes, we've got Guardian Pinnacle on this as well. So there's nothing like really facetious or anything like that in here. It's pretty straightforward stuff. If you don't think that 10 stacks stack up, just make it 1 and then delete the build out because it's not worth playing at that point. It is 10 stacks, let's be real. And the other thing is this doesn't account for blood stacks from Vaal Reap. So this sort of says it hits 1.18 million dot, but it's actually something much greater than that. I just don't know what settings I need to hit it with to be able to adjust for that. And Vaal Reap, is Vaal Reap, so it hits 9 stacks instead of a cap of 5 stacks. Anyway, that's it for the configurations. Pretty simple build. Let's talk about gear. Okay, so for gearing on this build, we're running a Forbidden Shako with a level 34 Corrupting Cry setup. Now, if you can't get level 34, you can't afford it. Level 30 is perfectly fine. Just be aware your damage will be slightly lower, but it'll still work fine. Outside of that, we run Defiance of Destiny with Charisma on it. Now, the big reason why is obviously because we're running Corrupting Cry, we're casting a lot of life every second. In fact, 458 life for every cast every 1.61 seconds. This mitigates 31% of that life with your regeneration, and the constant recharge off Enduring Cry basically has nil effect to your build. Everything runs life in this build, so there's no mana cost, but it does get chonky on life after a little while. Red Blade Banner is the go-to shield. The reason being is Warcries have infinite power and also increase Warcry recovery rate by 50%. This is pretty major considering we're trying to maximize the amount of recovery that we possibly can in the build, so this is a must-have shield. And it also gives you increased taunt duration as well. Yeah. Now, wand. You basically just want a wand with flat spell damage and as much damage over time modification and physical damage over time that you can possibly get onto it. If you can get +1 physical skill gems, even better. My wand is by no means the best wand in the game, but it does the job. And it is still pretty expensive, to be honest with you. It's like 6 div. Then the rings, I'm simply just using anything to cap out my attributes, because strength, intelligence, dex becomes a bit of a problem in this build. Mainly intelligence and dexterity is a problem in this build, so I have a lot of intelligence on my rings. And also resistances and chaos resistances. Same with my eagle coil. This isn't the best ring, nor either of these are the best rings, but they get the job done. Now, you will need a 4th Vaal setup on this. It's why it's so tanky, and this synergizes with the Divine Flesh setup and helps you cap out your chaos resistances, bearing in mind also that this gets about 80,000+ armor, and armor applies to chaos damage taken from hits, and we start converting elemental to chaos damage in this build, as well as converting physical to chaos damage as well. All of this gives you a huge defense advantage in basically not dying as you're auto-bombing, so it's a pretty mindless auto-bomber. It's not the most DPS-centric auto-bomber, but you're going to live and you can face tank a fair bit of stuff. Now, gloves-wise, I'm literally just running resistance on my gloves, as much armor, and some dexterity. These gloves were like 30C. They're really cheap. The implicits, I'm still unsure around exerted attacks. I don't think it has any effect, so the implicits can be fixed, and there is a Searing Exarch implicit that does do physical damage over time, but I'm just really unlucky and I haven't been able to roll it yet. So that would be my preference if I was going to recommend what you should put there. Now, the flow untethering, this is a really cheap belt. It's only like 10C, 10 to 14C. And this gives you the Harbinger of Time that you can see here. Now, you want a one with about a 20% cooldown reduction roll, because this increases your CDR on your Warcries. So as you can see, it's just constantly Warcrying as you run around. There's probably ways to get the cooldown up even further, but I haven't yet figured that out. 1.61 is my hard limit, but I could probably do better if I put more time into this build. Now, boots, I literally got boots with Warcry cooldown recovery rate. This is a Eater of Worlds implicit. This is a grand roll. It's not overly difficult to get, and most people used to look at it as a pretty useless roll, but for this build, perfect. Outside of that, movement speed, life, any other resistances you can sack on with armor, and you're laughing. Now, flask-wise, I use Taste of Hate. Replica Witchfire Brew, I really like, and the reason why is it grants level 21 vulnerability aura during effect, so that hits everything in the vicinity, so you don't need to worry about running curse auras in your build setup or anything like that. And it also increases your evasion rating, and we have a little bit of evasion in here, and we run iron reflexes as well, so that converts their evasion into armor, so it increases our armor essentially, so it acts like another granite flask. They're running a pretty bad granite flask with an armor roll on it, and a pretty bad quicksilver flask with a cast speed roll on it, which really doesn't have any effect on the build. And the most expensive flask of all the flasks I have, the Progenesis, and this is pretty major in this build, so if you don't have it, it's going to be a much harder build to run without it. Realistically, you really need a Progenesis to make this work well. And that's where I was saying this build will probably set you back about 120, 130 div if you're really adamant. It's just like one of those like meme builds, but it works really well and it's a lot of fun. But that's it for the gearing, so let's talk about the gem setups next. Okay, so for gem setups, in the helm I'm running Enduring Cry, Call to Arms, Awaken Brutality, and Awaken Swift Affliction. In my wand I'm running Pride, Determination, and Malevolence. In my chest I'm running that is a Vaal Reap, gem, level 21, level 21, 20. And then I'm running Awaken, Control, Destruction, Empower. If you can get a level 4, even better, you'll do more damage. Awaken Brutality, Awaken Swift Affliction, and Cruelty. In my shield, I'm running Shield Charge, Empower, which actually is wrong. That should just be Life Tap. I was leveling this up. And Faster Attacks. And in my gloves, Life Tap, Cast when Damage Taken, Culling Strike, and Hydrosphere. Now, just make sure you're running like level 1, Cast when Damage Taken, Life Tap, and Hydrosphere, and this will just follow you around as you get hit. Culling Strike can be maxed out, and this is how we cull as we walk through maps, so we do a lot of damage that way too. Now, outside of this, in our boot setup, we're running Phase Run, Automation, Molten Shell, and Life Tap. And as you can see, the recharge on automation is quite low as well because cooldown reduction off the belt affects automation. So this build is like a set and forget build. You just basically run, you hit phasing, and you're nice and fast. And this is no mage blood, so this is pretty fast considering. And if I hit my flask, it's a pretty quick build considering. Now, if you could put a mage blood on it, even better. You'll just make it tankier and you'll just make it faster, and you'll probably be able to amp its damage up a little bit too, but entirely up to you. But that's it for the gem setups. Okay, so for the pathing tree. So number 1, all strength nodes, convert them to Tattoo of Tukahama Warcaller. This gives you 8% Warcry cooldown recovery. That's the first thing I'll say. Then basically we're going to follow down into Warrior's Blood, into Heart of the Warrior, into Born to Fight. We need all the nodes under Deep Breaths, and also the AoE, because the bigger the AoE, the more things you're applying Corrupted Blood to, and we want to get remove all damaging elements when you Warcry, so this means we don't need to run Purity of Elements. Our Warcries expunge all of that from us constantly. Then I've got an Adorn setup in here, just in this dual setup here, or yeah, dual socket. Then we come across and we go up, and we want to get Divine Flesh set up, so we need Glorious Vanity with Zebiqua. I just like saying Zebiqua, it's really cool. And that gives us the ability to proc Divine Flesh if you've got everything set up properly. And then we come up and we grab Sovereignty. We want the 8% increased damage per aura, and we grab Purity of Flesh. Then we come back down. We'll talk about cluster nodes later. We come back down. We want Vanquisher, and we want to apply 40% physical damage with skills that cost life. We come down and grab Stamina. I've got my Forbidden Flesh set up. Now, this has a Hinekora Death Fury setup, which means when enemies explode, or when they get hit with Corrupting Blood, they have a chance to explode. And that's where, when you see this map, and if you've seen the live streams, you see enemies just blowing up all around you. It's using the Chieftain Hinekora Death Fury modifier, or Ascendancy, sorry. But if you didn't want to run that, you could just run more magic rare gem, magic corrupted jewels, and increase your damage even further. So it's up to you. I just like this for doing map explode. It's really cool. Outside of that, I'm then running Cannibalistic Rite. This just gives you further increased damage because we're casting life to cast our Warcry. Then we come down and grab Bloodless. We get all the nodes up to Natural Authority. We want the cooldown nodes as well as the increased AoE nodes. And we're going to grab the Debilitate Mastery on that. Then we come down, we grab Champion the Claws, 10% increased aura effect on you. We come down and get Iron Reflexes, Golem's Blood, Cloth and Chain, and also the 8% armor per endurance charge, because we get like, 5 endurance charges. We come up and we grab the Vigor node up here, and we've got a Watcher's Iron here. And then we also have the Adamant node, and this gives us increased armor and also Corrupted Blood immunity when we use a guard skill. But this isn't infallible, and you can die for doing things like, Architect down and Delve. So I also have Corrupted Blood immunity, and it also means my guard skill lasts for a long time as well. So my guard skill is always up, which is my my Molten Shell. Then we come up and we grab Unwavering Stance because we need stun immunity, and we got another socket here where we've got my Forbidden Flame. Now, both my nodes in here are Master the Fundamentals, Battle Hardened, and Furious Assault. We don't need Furious Assault, but we need Master the Fundamentals and Battle Hardened. This helps us cap our reses and increases our armor and our physical damage. And we have one medium cluster, which is Warning Call. This gives us increased armor, and Lead by Example. This gives us permanent Onslaught. So we have Onslaught in the build. And I also have a Corrupted Blood jewel in here, which costs like 1 or 2 div, just for good measure. Just in case my, guard skill isn't up, then I've got permanent Corrupted Blood anyway, so it doesn't make any real difference. Outside of that, Ascendancy-wise, so you're pretty much going to start with going Untiring, Unflinching, Unrelenting, and Unbreakable, or any combination that you want, doesn't really matter. And if you wanted to know how I leveled this up, basically just play Righteous Fire, or Smite or Righteous Fire, and you can switch this pretty early on, and then you just run a really scuffed setup with Corrupt and Cry, and switch to Reap, and then eventually once you get your Forbidden Shaco, because this isn't a League starter build, you just get your Forbidden Shaco and Bob's your uncle, your damage goes through the roof. But that's basically it for the skill tree, and all this will be in the POB will be in the description below for you to refer to. Okay, so I hope this build sort of gives you an idea of how to approach this build. Now, what's this build good for? Like, it's pretty good at T16 mapping, T17 mapping, delve at like 400 to 500, really consistent and easy to play. If you're a controller player on PC, because the console market would just be way too expensive to buy some of this gear, it's perfect. If you just want to sit there with a controller and mindlessly farm through T16 maps for hours on end and complete challenges, perfect for that. Perfect for Heist. It handles Heist like a champ. Super tanky. It's good for PC players. Easy on the wrists as well. Very few buttons in the build. Literally, you're just going to walk, and then every now and again you might shield dash, shield charge when you get bored, or if you want to go faster, and then every now and again you might run into a boss and you're like, oh, I don't want to sit here and wait, so I'll just hit it with my my Reap, or I'll just hit Q and then just let the Corrupted Blood do the rest of it. Anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. Don't forget to follow the Twitch. I stream on there pretty regularly, like every second night at the moment. And yeah, there's also a Twitter there somewhere. And yeah, anyway, I've got to think of some other content for different games that I'm keen to play. But yeah, if you've got any other suggestions of any other builds that you want to see me tackle, or interesting off-meta stuff, post it in the comments below as well. I'm always interested to fish around for ideas and things like that. But until next time, have a good one, and I'll see you guys later.